Planning the music for this service, I got the theme from Dr. Gregory, and it's Chasing Donkeys. He's really trying to challenge me on this one. There's not many donkey songs that you can pull out for to fit that theme. And actually, I worked out a medley, and I tried it out on the choir, and it started sort of like this. That's not it. And I won't go into it, but it ends with play that donkey music, white boy. But I did it for the choir, and they said, what else you got? So I don't want to even go into it. So I decided to do something maybe a lighter nature. How many people like gospel quartet? Yeah, all right. Yeah, well, I got an amen from the preacher. That's all that matters, right? And so I decided to do some gospel quartet music tonight. Some of you who are more sophisticated realize that there's one problem with that. I used to have a gospel quartet, but I'd like to just show you or sing about the story that happened there. My alto, she got married, and her husband Larry won't let her sing with someone as handsome as me. My tenor from grace did fall. He got in trouble with the law. He joined a quartet in the state penitentiary. My quartet now has left me all alone. So I'll sing all four parts all alone. I'll sing bass, I'll sing tenor, I'll sing alto and soprano. Since all my other singers have left, I'm the world's smallest gospel quartet. I better not tell you what happened to my harmonica player. My soprano one night was singing. She had the rafters a-ringing, and then it happened. What a terrible thing. She had her hair teased away up high, but all that hairspray caught on fire, and she sang notes I never thought she could sing. My quartet now has left me all alone, all alone. So I'll sing all four parts all alone, all alone. I'll sing bass, I'll sing tenor, I'll sing alto and soprano. Since all my other singers have left, I'm the world's smallest gospel quartet, gospel quartet. I thought often when I would see a catastrophe on the news, a disaster, natural disaster, earthquake, tsunami, I would often think, that is terrible, and we're giving a lot of news coverage, and of course we should. But the people that I live with, they have personal tsunamis and personal earthquakes quite often. That time where they get the wrong report from the doctor, or that pink slip, or they get the call in the middle of the night, and suddenly just everything in their life changes in that very moment. So I decided to write a song called Hold On to the Rock, and you'll hear the words something like, it doesn't take a mighty earthquake to shake the ground you stand on. Life is changed like a hurricane and blow all the plans you planned on, but hold on to the rock.
a mighty earthquake to shake the ground you stand on. 'Cause life can change like a hurricane and blow the plans you planned on. Well, the ground is gonna shake and the wind is gonna blow. Who you gonna trust and where you gonna go? You gotta hold on to the rock of ages. Hold on to the cornerstone. Stand strong on the sure foundation. Surrounded by the fortress strong. When all the storms of life are raging, hold on to the rock. You know, sometimes when life is easy, it's so easy to keep the faith, to be grateful for every blessing when every blessing comes our way. But when life shakes us to our very soul, who you gonna trust and where you gonna go? You gotta hold on to the rock of ages. Hold on to the cornerstone. Stand strong on the sure foundation. Surrounded by the fortress strong. When all the storms of life are raging, hold on to the rock. You've got to hold on to the rock. You've got to hold on to the rock. Hold on to the rock.
What a delight it is to be here on the campus of Carson-Newman, to be here with your president, my friend, Dr. O'Brien, new friends who welcomed me so warmly at Measles, to be working this week as a co-laborer with Pepper Choplin. What a delight. I don't think I ever heard anybody sing all four parts of Southern Gospel. I'm a midnight YouTube Southern Gospel listener, and I think I heard Vestal Goodman in there somewhere. I'm not quite sure, but what a delight to be with such a creative musician and to enter into the heritage of this great school more than ever. When I have the privilege to come to such a place as this, I have a sense of absolute grace just to stop by and to enter into the great heritage of so many, not just decades now, but in a third century of existence. I was looking last night at the picture of those old founders of this university. I love to look at those. Some of them look like ZZ Top. They had those long beards. They're looking out at you. And I look at those old daguerreotypes and half-tone, and I hope that those pioneer heroes are able to look down and see what became of what they started. What a heritage, and it's an honor to get to be here and just a few days to enter into that heritage. It's been noted that the title of this message is From Donkeys to Destiny. In case you wonder what that's about, you might open the Old Testament historical book of 1 Samuel. In the 9th chapter of 1 Samuel is one of those Old Testament Hebrew scripture narratives that makes you scratch your head the first time you read it. You read, there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zeror, the sons of Bechorath, the son of Aphiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a choice and handsome son whose name was Saul. There was not a more handsome person than he among the children of Israel, from his shoulders upward. He was taller than any of the people. Now, the donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. Kish said to his son Saul, please take one of the servants with you, rise and go look for the donkeys. So he passed through the mountains of Ephraim and through the land of Shalishah, but they didn't find them. Then they passed through the land of Choplin, and they were not there. He passed through the land of the Benjamites, but they did not find them. When they'd come to the land of Zuph, Saul said to his servant who's with him, "Come, let us return, lest my father cease worrying about the donkeys and become worried about us." And he said to him, "Look now, there is in the city a man of God. He's an honorable man, and all that he says surely comes to pass. Let's go there. Perhaps he can show us the way we should go." As a matter of divine prearrangement, look at verse 15. While all this donkey chasing was going on, the Lord had told Samuel in his ear the day before Saul came, saying, "Tomorrow, about this time, I'll send you a man from the land of Benjamin, and you shall anoint him commander, ruler, as it were, over my people." Saul left home chasing donkeys and ran straight into his destiny and was anointed king. Not long ago, my adult sons and I went on a kind of genealogical search. We had a weekend, so we left Fort Worth, Texas, west part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, went up 2 hours to Jack County. You wouldn't know that, but it's sandy, full of mesquite tree, post oak rattlesnakes. It's very inhospitable. My ancestors decided they'd try to farm there, which wasn't the best decision in family history. We went to a little town called Bryson, and out on a road, off the road is a rural cemetery, Cottonwood. And they knelt down by the grave marker of their great-great-great-grandfather, Joseph Wolfe, who somehow, Lord only knows, made his way there from Holland to Jack County. And I took their picture. And that's as far back as we can trace any line of our family. When you talk about tracing relatives, it's an interesting word. I had one uncle who did a test drive on a used car, went a little far, forgot to take it back, and they traced him, but that's a whole other meaning of the word. Here they were tracing relatives. I wonder if it wasn't like that for Saul. If you count this, there's 5 generations of the Kish family. He's a mighty man of valor, a warrior chieftain in the favorite tribe, Benjamin. I don't know if they had a dining room. I can imagine kind of like that PBS show Downton Abbey where the Granthams lived. There were pictures of generations of the Saul family up there. He'd look around and he'd say, "I'm the heir of all of this." He had some entitlement in his life. Life had been good to him. I don't know John D. Rockefeller IV. He's born in 1937, but I know this. In the Rockefeller dining room, there was a picture of his great-grandfather, the richest man in the world up till Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or whoever's on top today. And his grandfather, John D. Jr., who built Rockefeller Center, gave the land for the United Nations. I don't know how it feels to be that way. A person with generations of entitlement. But Saul shows up just that way. That's good enough, and on top of that, he was a man of endowment. It says he was the most handsome and the tallest man in Israel. It says he was best looking. I guess they had a reality TV show, Find Mr. Israel. And he won it. I don't know, depending on the generation you're from, he was the Clark Gable or the Denzel or the Brad Pitt or Justin Bieber. I don't know, somebody of that day. But then he was the tallest person in the country. There's a phrase here that's come into our language and we don't even know it. He was head and shoulders above everybody else. That's where that comes from. Now, if you're taking notes tonight, you can write this down as a truth about life. If you're tall and handsome, it's good. There he was. Tallest, most handsome. Did you ever wonder how George Washington got to be on the dollar bill? got a city named after him, a state, father of our country. It's not because he was a great general. In fact, if you read David McCullough's 1776, he almost lost the whole thing. His call, he was the tallest, most impressive guy around. 6'2" tall, 190 pounds. Benjamin Rush, who signed the Declaration of Independence, said when Washington was on a horse, he made every king of Europe look like his valet. He was impressive. And here's Saul. Generations of pictures on the wall. Daddy Kish, warrior chief. Saul, tall, handsome. Now this is kind of a setup. You think he's going to go do something really big, like, win the Grand Slam or be a decathlete or maybe be like LeBron, youngest man to ever get a triple-double, 20 years old. He kind of let down. With all of this endowment and entitlement, he's sent out on a donkey chase. Now, some of y'all smirked when I said donkey. You laughed when Pepper said donkey. Donkeys just don't get a lot of respect. You ever notice that? You're laughing right now, see? Now, dog, you can have affection for dog. Lion, king of the jungle, lions earn respect. Eagle stirs up patriotism. Some people even like cats. Even though you don't own a cat thinks it owns you. You like cats. But a donkey, everybody laughs. That sterile offspring of a mare and a mule just makes people laugh. Stubborn, recalcitrant. He's on a nationwide donkey chase. You'd think with the introduction to Saul that he's about to paint something that'll hang in the Louvre, and then it looks like paint by numbers. You look at this grand staircase of a life, and it goes flat into a wall and goes nowhere. It looks like his life is a preface without a book or a prelude without a symphony. Just not ready for a nationwide donkey chase. And in addition to that, look at the irony of it. It was a nationwide donkey chase. If you read these places on the map, he went over half the country looking for runaway donkeys. Now, there needs to be some proportion between what you're chasing, how far you chase it, and what it's worth. If he were Indiana Jones looking for the lost ark or looking for weapons of mass destruction or something, you'd think it was worth it. But he covers half the country looking for runaway donkeys. And on top of that, he doesn't find them. That's one thing to have a successful donkey search. It's another thing to wear yourself out up and down hills and look at the lost opportunity cost. That's what business people talk about, lost opportunity cost. That is, if you're chasing runaway donkeys, you're not doing something of more value. Pretty bleak, isn't it? They come to a place called Zuph. That doesn't even sound very good, does it? 3 consonants and Zuph. And they're worn out at Zuph. I'm not much of a poet, but Zuph is where you say, I've had enough. It's tough at Zuph. You're tired, you're broke. Daddy's more worried about where you went than where the donkeys went. And he's ready to go home. Now, if you study the geography of the Holy Land, there's not a map anywhere that tells you where Zuph is. Zuph, I think, is a state of mind. There's no zip code for Zuph. There's no site, Zuph.com. Zuph is a place where you thought you were going to fly with eagles, and you wound up with a bunch of turkeys. You thought that life had promise. You had a vision. You knew how it was going to work out. And then you're at Zuph. Zuph you can't find on the map, but sometimes you can find Zuph in your heart. Oh, maybe you came here. You were just sure you were going to be God's gift to a certain major, and that didn't work out. You came here and you knew, fill in the blank, And it didn't happen that way. And your address is Zuff, and you feel like you've just had enough. You feel like Saul did when he was broke, chasing donkeys. You thought you had found Mr. Right, and he only turned out to be Mr. Half-Right. And you're at Zuff. I won't sit down here, I won't keep you long, but let me just give you some keys about chasing donkeys and finding destiny. And I'll sit down. First of all, when you're chasing donkeys and finding your destiny, find out God put somebody in your future that you didn't even know would be there. Now, this servant is incognito. He's nameless. He's unidentified. It's one of those persons in the Bible that seems not to be a marquee player. He's a supporting actor, maybe just an extra, just called the servant. And when they're at Zuff, the servant of this wealthy, entitled young man says, wait a minute. Let's not go home. I've heard that around here somewhere there's a seer, a man of God, and what he says usually comes to pass. Maybe he knows where lost donkeys are. And Saul listened to this unidentified incognito man, says, okay. Said, we don't have anything to pay him. It's kind of funny. They looked at what they had left, about $1.85, and said, well, we'll put that in the offering plate, and maybe he'll tell us where the donkeys are. He listened to an anonymous person. In your life, by divine synchronicity, that coming together of things that don't seem to have any relationship. As I noted this morning, when Joseph went to jail, a butler and a baker got thrown in there with him. God has the habit of putting people in your future you didn't know would be there, and they didn't know they'd be there. And everything can turn on that moment. If Saul had been headstrong and said, I want to go back, be gone with the donkeys, he wouldn't have been anointed king. The name J.M. Stagg probably doesn't ring a bell unless you really know the footnotes of history. I'd be interested after church, if you know who J.M. Stagg is, come tell me. I'd like to know that. J.M. Stagg. And yet history turned on his advice. J.M. Stagg was from Scotland. He was a group commander. 3:30 a.m. in the morning, June 4th, 1944, in Portsmouth, at the headquarters of Supreme Allied Commander, 54-year-old Dwight Eisenhower. Around Eisenhower, names that belong to the ages. Bradley, Montgomery. He was his 28-year-old. Eisenhower looked at him and said, what's the weather going to be tomorrow? Group Commander James Stagg said, he smiled. He said, it's going to be 36 hours of clear weather. Eisenhower would ask him every day what the weather was. He listened to that 28-year-old whose name is lost to history. And Eisenhower said two famous words, let's go. And he launched 5,000 ships and D-Day because he listened to J.M. Stagg. J.M. Stagg pops up a lot of places. Someone at a critical moment of your life, oh, I wish I could tell you about the J.M. Staggs in my life. My first pastorate in the poorest neighborhood of South Waco. A groundskeeper at Baylor University was the chair of the deacons. Changed my life. My seminary pastorate, a Texas rancher with a fourth grade education. J.M. Sharp, rancher. He'd been everything, a boxer, a pastry cook, a truck driver, a mortician. I kept learning different things he'd done. He changed my life. God puts people in your life and it's good to look for them. This guy didn't even get his name, just a servant at Zuph. Let's stay here. And while they were staying there, God was digging, literally the Hebrew says, digging into the ear of Samuel, who didn't even want to hear it. Said, about this time tomorrow, you're going to find a young man chasing runaway donkeys. Anoint him king. Something else about that. God is able to move you from donkeys to destiny, even when the odds seem against it. There's a divine synchronicity that overcomes all the odds. If you read this story, things are just stacked up. I talked this morning about Carl Jung. Somebody asked me about that after church. The last book he wrote was called Synchronicity. It was about events that are acausal. They have no causal relationship. A book here, a movie there, a song here, you missed an airplane there, and they come together and life changes. Now, Carl Jung was a little new agey about it. He thought that happened because all of our minds are hooked up and we make up some one big world mind. I think that's goofy. I think it's because of Jesus. Divine prearrangements. If you rewind this story, it's interesting. There are 13 things that had to happen, and they had to happen at the right thing. If you go through it, first of all, Kish didn't have to have any donkeys. He did. They didn't have to be runaway donkeys on the land, but they did. Kish didn't have to send anybody to look for them, but he did. He could have sent another son, but he sent Saul. Saul could have found them down at the other end of Route 3 and brought them back home, but he didn't. They kept chasing him till they got to Zuph. Samuel didn't have to be holding church at Zuph. You read this story. Saul ran into a young woman coming to draw water at the well. She didn't have to be there drawing water. He asked her, "Where's the prophet?" And she said, "Well, he's about to have church up there." Samuel didn't have to listen to God when he said, "Anoint a young man chasing donkeys king." In fact, Samuel was head of the anti-king party. He didn't want a king. God made him anoint Saul. Saul didn't. You get 13 things. I won't go through the whole list. Yes, ma'am. Suppose I had a deck of cards, 52 playing cards. That's what they tell me. They tell me there's 52 cards in a deck. Deacons told me that. I don't know. Maybe there isn't. 52 cards in a deck. If you shuffle them perfectly, till they're perfectly shuffled, what are the odds that you could call a card, 13 cards, and call it before you dealt it? Or said, "I'm going to deal a ace of spades." Boom, there's an ace of spades. I'm going to deal a three of hearts. 13. You know what the odds are? 1 out of 635 billion. That's with a B, like, boy. Long odds, aren't they? I have found that God is like a divine chess player in that regard. I always wanted to play chess. Never got good at it. Read books about it. Tried it. Just never got past 3 moves. I'd move a pawn, somebody'd move a knight, I'd move, I got lost. You know, they say chess masters, brilliant chess players, you make your move and they can think 30 moves ahead, all the way to checkmate. If a chess master can think that way, how do you think God can think? You zig, God already zagged. And you can be chasing donkeys, and he's putting things together in your life that are against all odds. I sit somewhere right now where if I could tell you a long story of my own life defies almost any odds that I'd be doing what I'm doing where I'm doing it. He's a God, praise the odds. But notice this. It doesn't depend on you. This whole thing didn't depend on Saul. He wanted to go home. It didn't depend on Samuel. Samuel was the last of the judges or the first of the prophets, whatever you want to make him. He didn't want a king. God must have a sense of humor to take the one guy who didn't want a king as much as anybody else and say, I want you to anoint the first king. It says in Hebrew he had to dig into Samuel's ear. You know, horses can sleep standing up, bats can sleep hanging upside down, and sometimes we can sleep on God in any position. And he had to dig through his ear. I want you to anoint this young man chasing runaway donkey. Samuel didn't want to do it. And Saul, there is a moment of high humor in this. The young lady tells Saul, Samuel's holding church, or Samuel was the most famous man in the country. In verse 18 it says, Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, please tell me, where is the seer's house? That is, tell me where Samuel is. I mean, that would be like running flat into the most visible people of our times, a Donald Trump or a Barack Obama, and saying, could you tell me where Trump or Obama is? It's clueless. Clueless. He was face to face with the most famous person in the country and said, could you tell me where you are? It's funny. He said, I'm right here. This is a story in that regard of cluelessness. And yet, in the middle of all that cluelessness, God did what he wanted to do. There's an interesting order of words in the biblical language. I will send you to him. You see that order? I, Jehovah, will send you, Samuel, to Saul. God, the great prearranger. Now, I'm a preacher, so I like preacher stories, and not, whatever your hero is, whatever you like. I love stories of how God did that in preacher's life. There was a young man, 19 years old. He was really a country hick, didn't know how to dress. He's pastor at a little church outside of Cambridge, England, in the English county of Essex. Tiny town called Water Beach. Tiny little place, 4 streets. The whole town had been shaken by his preaching. When he came there, it was full of drunks. When he left, you could hear people singing hymns out of the open windows of every house in that British village. That's what they said. He had his first big break to preach in Cambridge at a Sunday school rally. A lot of churches there. This 19-year-old got up, preached, and the next 2 preachers insulted him. I mean, insulted him to his face in front of the congregation. One of them said, go home, stay there till you can grow a beard. He was shattered. However, sitting out there that night was a layman from Essex County. His name was George Gould. That's why he shows up in history. He heard that young preacher, wrote a letter to a friend of his who was chair of the pastor's search committee of the most famous church in the capital of the world, right then, London. But I just heard a 19-year-old preach like I've never heard in my life. Olney sent a letter to the little church. C.H. Spurgeon didn't think it was really for him. He sent it back and said, it must be another Spurgeon, it's not me. Olney sent the letter back and said, we mean you. And that self-taught country hick rode a train and spent the night in a boarding house and preached on a cold November morning in London. And for the rest of his life, they couldn't find a place big enough to hold the people who wanted to hear him. And it all happened on the worst night of his 19 years, when he'd been humiliated at a church service. But at just the right time, God had somebody out there who wrote a letter. Now, that's a preacher story. I could tell you a lot of other stories like that. Right time, right place, awful moment, zuff, you've had enough. And God does something. Sometimes I think God must like donkeys. There was another day. Saul's real successor as king of the Jews. It's Holy Week. He needed a donkey to ride into Jerusalem. You can read about it in Matthew 21. He told two incognito disciples, go over there. There's a little village, Bethpage, means house of faith. Go over there, and you're going to find a donkey tied up and a colt. They're going to think you're cattle rustlers. You tell them the master needs him. And they'll give you that donkey, and I'll ride it to my destiny. God can take people chasing donkeys and take them to destiny.